Finally, some nice weather, which means that I can finally drive the cool cars, like this one. Say hello to the 2021 BMW M8 Competition Gran Coupé. This is possibly the weirdest angle for the new 8 Series Gran Coupé. Look how long this car is. It's like some kind of a long, curvaceous snake. It looks kind of odd, but it does allow it to have 2 extra doors with some pretty cool seats in the back for the kids. So this should serve as a great argument for the spouse onto why you'll spend $150,000 on a brand new BMW. And why should you get this instead of a 7 Series, you ask? Well, I'm about to explain why this 7 Series based sedan is a much more exciting vehicle. Now, many people, including myself, have accused the new BMW M8 of being way too sober and not very different than a standard 850i. But now that I'm driving this thing for the 5th time, yes, the 5th time since it came out, I had a chance to really observe the details. There are a lot of very subtle details about the M8 that distinguish it to a standard 8 Series. For instance, the cooling. The air intakes are a lot larger. The BMW nostril is wider. You have additional cooling in the bottom as well and a more aggressive front bumper overall. I also kind of like the darkened chrome here around the grille. It's pretty cool. You also get a completely revised rear fascia with a more aggressive rear diffuser, larger exhausts that are part of the competition package. I'll get back to this one in a minute. They're properly loud. And of course you get the subtle low deck lid spoiler and the competition logo right there under the M8 badge. Now competition, 17 horsepower more, you get the upgraded exhaust, you also get forged alloyed wheels, which I don't have because Canada and we're in winter tires. All of it for $10,000. That's right, $10,000 for 17 horsepower. And like all good M cars, the entire chassis was re-engineered. The car is stiffer, it has upgraded suspension, bigger brakes, better cooling, and it pumps out 617 horsepower and 570 foot-pounds of torque from a twin turbocharged 4.4-liter V8. It's all coupled to a 8-speed automatic gearbox supplied by ZF. What's also really cool about the new M8 is that it's all-wheel drive, but also rear-wheel drive. Before I hit the road, I want to talk about how nice and wide the rear of this car is, but also about the rear seats. Let's come inside. All right, so it's not exactly a 7 Series rear seat room, but it's not bad considering that you're basically just carrying 2 bros along for the ride. I have sport bucket seats in the back and they're actually quite cool, but as you can see, my head kind of touches the slopey roofline, so I kind of have to sit lowrider style. I do have some nice amenities though. I have a center console right here with climate controls in my face. I have USB-C connections right there for my phone. And I have ironically, a center console that kind of tries to mimic a luxury car. I have fancy cup holders right here, which are obviously going to break and cost a fortune to change. And I have a cute little console to store some cool stuff down there. I really like the duvet texture inside it. Oh, yes, yes. Listen to that V8. Good brakes, good brakes. Now, I drove the original BMW 8 Series when it first came out in 2018. I actually drove all of its variants. I drove the Coupe, then I drove it in M8 form in convertible, then I drove the Gran Coupé in standard 850i, and then back to this M8 Gran Coupé. There's been a lot of misconception around this car because a lot of people have been saying, well, it's kind of like a larger 6 Series. It doesn't honor its past like we expected. But the more I spend some time with this new 8 Series, the more I appreciate its details. Now, the rules of Grand Touring are pretty straightforward. You need a lot of luxury, a lot of comfort, at least for the front seats, and a lot of power. This is the most powerful BMW in its entire lineup. Now, obviously, the M8 is a large vehicle, especially in this sedan form, so it is heavy. You're getting all-wheel drive, you're getting large wheels, a lot of technology, you got a V8 under the hood. It's hard to balance all of that out. I mean, no matter how stiff the chassis is and how fine-tuned the suspension will be, you just can't hide the fact that this is a very fat car. However, it does still feel somewhat light on its feet. Pushing the M8 Competition in this kind of road is actually quite easy. You'll cover ground very, very fast, and you're not really gonna notice what's happening outside. The seats are impeccably comfortable. I mean, look how cool they look with the nice M8 logo right behind my head. I personally love this yellow mustard color. It contrasts really well with the black exterior. There's a lot to like about the M8's cabin. I mean, build quality is obviously exquisite. Also, the materials used. Again, it's very subtle, but when you take the time to look at them, you realize why this car is $150,000. I have this nice and sweet feeling suede material all over the car. I have it around the center console, down at the bottom of the doors, and here on the A-pillar. The steering wheel is nice, thick, and meaty. BMW does this really well. The cars feel like they're built like a rock. They're well planted on the road, and you have amazing tactility in the driving feel. Even though this is a very large and heavy car, you are feeling the M car hidden inside it. It's ferocious. Acceleration is constant. This V8 engine never runs out of puff, and it sounds fantastic. I hear that? Oh, I love how it burbles when you downshift. But it's not overly ostentatious. It doesn't scream, "Look at me," like other Grand Tours out there. That's why a lot of people don't appreciate the M8 for what it is. It does fly under the radar, but it's a very sleek automobile. It has a low, wide stance on the road, and the carbon fiber roof from the M8 really gives it a more aggressive demeanor, especially with the two slight bumps on the roof. Now, BMW has let go of its dual clutch transmission systems in favor of a ZF unit, and honestly, it's a good thing. This gets the ZF 8-speed that pretty much all new BMW M cars are getting and will get as well. The new BMW M4 has this setup now. It is a fantastic unit. However, I'm not a fan of the shift knob. To put it in drive, you have to move it on the right, put it back in manual mode, you gotta put it again. But once you do figure it out, it goes through gears effortlessly. Look how quick this thing changes gears. I gun it, second, I got paddle shifters, and then, God, this is, whoa, this is fast. Holy shit, this is fast. Okay, on the brakes. So yeah, the transmission works well. Then there's the way the all-wheel drive system works. This obviously sends the power to all four wheels. It's BMW's xDrive system, but it can also disengage the front axle to become rear-wheel drive, and it's a real rear-wheel drive car. Now, I can change this according to my drive modes that I pre-selected myself. I'm now in rear-wheel drive, and when I gun it, now the rear, okay, now this thing is this is tail happy. This is tail happy. I'm on winter tires right now, so I'm gonna be careful, but out of the corner, and yeah, I can get but it's so controllable. The ass is gonna kick out when you floor it, but oh my God, it feels like it's still wheel spin. I'm going like, I'm not gonna say how fast I'm going. I was in 5th gear, and the wheels were still spinning in the back. That's how much power there is. Obviously, the tarmac is still cold. We're entering spring here in Canada, so grip isn't exactly present. But yeah, I'm gonna put it back in all-wheel drive, if you don't mind. Now, one thing the BMW M8 doesn't lack are buttons. Now, there are a lot of buttons in this car. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm a fan of physical buttons. I much prefer them than touchscreens, but BMW went a little overboard with this one. Allow me to explain. Now, on the steering wheel, you have, as in all luxury cars, an array of different buttons to control audio system and lane departure warning, etc. The center console is also loaded with buttons as well. I have the shift knob I talked to you about earlier. On the shift knob itself, I can decide how fast my gears will change with a little button right here. I have the start button, of course, and down here I have different buttons. I have a setup to set up the car. I'm going to get back to that one in a bit. I have M mode, and I can turn on or turn off the exhaust. I can actually make it louder, hear that, or less loud, but it's still somehow loud anyway. Now into the infotainment system. So when you press the M mode button, you'll go between road and sport or track, and then this is also going to change your gauge cluster. I personally adore the M mode cluster. It's also the only way you can activate launch control. You're also going to get a heads-up display with a large RPM gauge right there in your face. It's perfect when you're plowing down the road at over 200 kilometers an hour, even though you're not allowed to do that, in this car. I mean, it reminds you, dude, you're going way too fast. Press on the brakes. So, in the infotainment setup, in the M menu, I can configure my M buttons. You probably noticed that on the steering wheel I have two red M buttons, M1 and M2. This is to allow you to have your favorite M car. You can have two different flavors of M car by configuring these buttons right here. When you go and configure M, you'll have access to the car's entire settings. So you can adjust the engine mapping between Efficient, Sport, and Sport Plus. You'll have the transmission. You can have it either in manual or automatic. 3 settings for each. The chassis, suspension, comfort, or sport. And my personal favorite is the BMW xDrive. Now, to be able to change that, you first have to turn off traction control like so. And then you click on M xDrive, and you can decide between 4-wheel drive sport, or 2-wheel drive. And that's going to allow you to really get the ass to kick out like you just saw when I was driving the car. Once everything is configured, they're loaded up into your little buttons, and as you're driving, you can alternate between M and M2, so you can really tailor the car to your liking. Then there's the driving information with sports display. I mean, this is a bit of a gimmick, but BMW gives you a G-meter, all the information you want to know about the engine's performance, like the PSI of boost, how much pound-feet of torque it's developing on the spot, and how much horsepower. I particularly find amusing that the meter shows 640 foot-pounds of torque, when in reality this engine doesn't make more than 580 foot-pounds of torque. It's easy then to dismiss the BMW M8 Gran Coupé Competition as just a more expensive version of a standard 8 Series. It's true, you're not getting that much more performance. It has the same architecture as a 7 Series, and its engine is taken out of a BMW M5. And an M5, well, will be a bit more comfortable in the rear and have a larger trunk. But just like the Porsche Panamera or the Mercedes-AMG GT 4-door, there isn't much sense behind this car. I mean, it exists only to fulfill the egos of very rich people who want something that's incredibly fast, but also practical because they have, well, a wife or kids or a husband or stuff to carry with them. Whatever you think about this BMW, what's important to know is that it's considerably less expensive than a Porsche Panamera or a Mercedes-AMG equivalent. It's extremely fast, immensely comfortable, and you know what? Driving this thing doesn't really make me want to drive anything else. And that says something. That means that, in a sense, even though it looks a little weird and it's not exactly flashy, BMW has accomplished, they've made a fantastic Grand Tour.